I'm afraid that you're not only a delinquent in African history, you're delinquent in African folklore. So much of our history is tied up with our folklore, but Europe has introduced words that didn't exist in anyone's vocabulary before. No one ever thought of anybody being inferior or superior. Intelligent people don't even devote. A human being can't fall into that category. And nobody had the extensive problems the Europeans had with women, because in the period of feudalism in Europe that lasted over 1,000 years, the white woman in Europe was a vassal. But the African woman had never been a vassal in that sense. If you read Sheikh Anta Diop's The Culture Unity of Black Africa, dealing with the history of the matriarch, I mean, he's got all evidence right there that we were the first people to support a woman as head of state. We were the first people to support a woman as riding head of her army. We were the first people to make women a god.
I'd like to ask Dr. Bernal to ask of Dr. Rogers a question.
I agree. I haven't read Black Athena Revisited. I haven't yet received my copy. But I do know who the contributors are, and I have read the reviews they wrote, and these reviews, I'm told, are very similar to the ones that originally appeared. So the title Revisited is slightly misleading, because these were immediate responses in the heat of polemic. Now, I have no doubt that the conclusions he summarized are the conclusions found in the book, but I'm not sure whether they're the result of an impartial selection, because having read most of the reviews, not all the reviews of my work, I find a pretty systematic selection for Black Athena Revisited from the hostile ones, and other ones which were more balanced or more friendly to me have been in fact, completely systematically not requested, or if requested, refused. And these include the three experts on Egyptian-Greek relations, not Egyptologists, not Hellenists, but specialists in the interrelations between the two cultures. And these three scholars' works were, in fact, excluded, and it seems, I wonder, if there's any other explanation for their exclusion than the fact that they would have appeared too friendly or to have taken my work too seriously, and serious is a word repeated in these reviews. Thank you.
I'm afraid I have some rather bad news for you, Professor Bernal. Professor Lefkowitz and I actually didn't read just some of the reviews of your work. We read them all. We collected them all. There's 50 pages of bibliography at the back of our book with asterisks next to the current outstanding reviews of your work from 1987 until just a few months ago. As for the selection process of the essays that went into it, I have to say to you that we, in fact, do believe that we have given a representative sample, and here's where the really bad news is. We actually excluded the ones that attacked you personally or attacked your competence for this field. As far as the three experts on Greek-Egyptian relations are concerned, two of them that you're referring to must be Eric Klein and Stanley Burstein. Eric Klein has written several articles about those relations. We, in fact, did ask him if he wanted to contribute, but he couldn't meet our deadline. When he eventually did, I'm afraid to tell you that his essay did not actually agree completely with your conclusions, but the reason why it wasn't in the collection was that it came in too late. As far as Professor Burstein is concerned, I'm afraid that his essay was much more critical than you seem to believe. So that really is the explanation, I think, for those omissions. I might say that as far as our editorial posture was concerned, we realized that these are sensitive, difficult issues. And we fully expected that we would be in this room here tonight. We didn't know the date, but we knew we'd be here. And so what we tried to do, was we tried to have what we call full disclosure. It's the reason why the book turned out to be not just another 150-page book with some essays sort of thrown together, but a book which attempts to give summaries of comprehensive accounts of the questions that Bernal raises. And we give Bernal full credit for raising those questions. I think that Professor Clarke and others are quite correct. Professor Bernal is not the first person to raise those questions, but in fact, he raised them in a compelling and interesting way, and we feel that we are giving him and those of you who are interested in these problems, as we are, complete respect, both by answering them in full and by being here tonight to defend our views.
I want to just, if I might...
Can I go back?
Yes, please do. I'm sorry.
I don't expect any scholar to agree with me entirely, and what I found with the reviews he said is that they did not agree with all I said, but they took what I said seriously, and they did agree with some significant things. I don't want total praise, and I'm sure they're right that the predominant reaction from the disciplines which I am challenging is hostile. I don't question that for the moment. But the selection does include, I'm told, personal attacks on me as being a baby and various other things. So I don't think they've been quite so scrupulous as far as that is concerned. I'm also intrigued because one person who had attended the meeting, the party given for the contributors to the book, which of course I was told nothing about, described it as a lynch mob. Another mutual friend of Mary's and mine refers to it regularly as the shit on Bernal book. And so I think there are very different perceptions of this book.
Is that a title that you come up with on the spot, or is it something you've been thinking about, Professor Bernal?
It's a title that a mutual friend of Mary's and mine uses regularly. He's a colleague at Cornell. It's not, I wouldn't have thought that up.
I think that if you look carefully, and I'm sorry that you haven't had an opportunity to work through the book carefully yet, I think when you do, you will see that there are not very many ad hominem attacks in it, although I find your defensiveness about that somewhat curious, since in Black Athena, volumes 1 and 2, part of your methodology has involved actually contextualizing people and talking about their family relations, their own personal backgrounds. And so I'm a little bit puzzled by that kind of response.
I have no objection to people attacking me personally. What I would like to see is a all-round collection, and I think that as I live by the sword of the sociology of knowledge, I must be prepared to die by it. And I think that people will see in 20 years where I'm coming from or what my personal problems or axes were. And I think that's part of the story of the book. But I think there's also the substance of the book. And I would have hoped to have found more, a wider scan, and we've had many collected volumes on this. I mean, don't think this is the first response to my work. There have been 3-4 journals now have had selections of articles on my responses and their responses to my responses, and there has been real dialogue. This was a book which I was not told about till long after it had begun, and when I was told about it and asked if I could see the pieces to write a response, I was told there was to be no response, and furthermore,